It's time for me to tell you all my secret. The key that I use to clearing my True Zenoiran challenge run. And that key is Ajax the Doom Knight. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel.
Unicorn Overlord.
Hello everyone, if you enjoy what I do, including my coverage of turn-based strategy or regular strategy RPGs such as Unicorn Overlord, news, guides, gameplay, etc., a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. So yes, you thought we were done with Unicorn Overlord content. Well, not by a long shot. I still have a bunch of things that I want to do with the game, and seeing as how we just finished our True Zenoiran challenge run, it seems like now is a good time to talk about some of the squads that I used to clear it. This is another episode of Steal This Squad, and I think you guys are going to enjoy this one. Any of you who've been following the True Zenoiran stream, you know where this is going, you know who it is that we're talking about. It's Ajax the Doom Knight and his Cavalier support squad. This is, bar none, the single strongest squad that we had over the course of the entire game, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt is one of my favorite squads that I've had in all of my time with Unicorn Overlord up to this point, and most likely will be into the future as well. What is the squad, and what is the goal? First off, these are the members. We have Ajax the Doom Knight, Renal the Great Knight, Clive the Great Knight, Eltalinda the Elven Sibyl, and Rhaenys the Featherbow. These last two slots have changed around a lot over the course of the run. There's plenty of options here that you can utilize, which we will talk about, but the core is Ajax as our DPS, and then Renal and Clive as sub-DPS and support. So, starting off, Ajax. Without him, this squad would not work. Well, to talk about that, we need to talk about the way we have him set up. Ajax is set up with an offensive all-rounder stat spread. You can see we have most of his stats maxed out with dues here as one of my single most valuable characters. So he has a very large quantity of HP, physical attack, and magical attack, which is pretty much everything that we need him to have. Having some defensive stats is important, but we can manage that with equipment and support from other characters. His raw stats, I wanted to be pumping a very strong mix of physical and magical attack, so that he can maximize his killing potential. The goal here was to create a Doom Knight that focuses primarily on magic damage via Dark Flame. Dark Flame, of course, if you did not know, costs 2 AP, has 50 physical and 50 magical potency, 1 hit with a hit rate of 100%, consumes 30% of your own HP to attack a row of enemies, inflicts burn, and gives you plus 50 potency versus debuffed targets. This is so good. There's a reason that we want to have our mixed physical and magical attack here, and it's that we can maximize both sides of Dark Flame. You can deal so much damage so quickly to a full row of enemies with this. It really cannot be overstated how powerful it is. If you're trying to figure out how to best use Doom Knights, lean into Dark Flame. It is by far their best attack option. This is emphasized even more if you do have some sort of debuff on enemy units, which we do have the capability to do with this squad, and it's part of the reason that it's set up the way that it is. But we'll go through the rest of what Ajax has going on before we talk about his support. We have Dark Flame set up with row with 2+ combatants as our first condition. Then a second one with exclusively armored, so even if there's only one armored unit in the front, then we'll hit him with Dark Flame so we can try and clear it. And then Vengeful Axe if there's just nothing left to do and we happen to have some AP left or just other conditions aren't fulfilled, whatever, we still have an option. Physical potency of 50, attack a single enemy, damage increases the less HP the user has. More likely than not, if we're using Vengeful Axe, there's a pretty good chance that we've got some damage on us, so it's going to deal decent damage regardless, and it'll be perfectly fine for just a last-second finisher. Then we have Demonic Pact, 1 passive point, activates after using an active skill, sacrifice 25% HP to grant the user +1 AP. So this is one of the conditions where we might wind up in a situation where we can actually use Vengeful Axe if we maybe only get 1 cast of Demonic Pact. We've used 2 Dark Flames, there's still enemies alive, then we have 1 AP left to use our Vengeful Axe. How often is that going to occur? Not very. More likely than not, you will carve through anything and everything before you get to that point, but it doesn't hurt to have that there as an option. Then we have Sanguine Arts, activates for attacking with an active skill, 1 passive point. User will restore HP equal to 50% of the damage dealt on their next attack. This is just a sustain option. Yeah, Ajax as a Doom Knight, not super tanky in terms of physical and magical defense, so having a way to heal himself while dealing damage to the enemy, especially with something that deals a lot of damage like Dark Flame, is very solid. Finally, we have Vengeance. Activates after being attacked. Grants the user plus 20% attack and 20% defense. Effect stacks. Grants the user plus 1 passive point if the user is at 50% HP or less. This actually comes into play less than you might expect. It'll probably trigger at least once, maybe. But the thing is, we have a lot of stun, we have a lot of blind, we have a lot of slow, we have a lot of ways to prevent the enemy from doing stuff to us. So while this is good, it actually won't be as commonly used as you would expect, and we still slay out. As far as our gear is concerned, what big, crazy, special, powerful axe do we have on Ajax? A standard Spell Steel Axe Plus. That's it. That's all he needs. It is forged, so its physical and magical attack are maxed out, but the reason I wanted to go with this was to ensure that we actually had comparable magic attack to physical attack. You can see in Ajax's stats in the top right there, he's got 80 physical attack and 79 magical attack. He is set up almost perfectly balanced, and it means that no matter what aspect is most or least effective against an enemy when it comes to your Dark Flame and your physical or magical damage, you're still going to be punching damage through. It's very, very nice. We also don't need any special attacks from any sort of other fancy axes, anything like that. We're here to use Dark Flame. It's all we want. So we'd really just be wasting an axe that has a special attack or something on it here anyway. Then we have the Wing Crest Shield, a very solid defensive option. Most importantly, giving a +1 passive point base, while still also having good guard rate, efficiency, defense, all that type of good stuff. We don't care here about the crit rate going down. Doom Knight is not a crit-based class anyway, and we don't need crits as we are already dealing more than enough damage with Dark Flame before you even consider the burn damage that it'll be dealing to enemies as they try to take their actions. Then we have an Amethyst Pendant, just rounding out our active and passive points, and a Dream Crown, giving us that extra active point and all stats +5 to ensure that all of our damage is even higher, and we have a little bit more tankiness as well. With this setup, Ajax, or really any unit, will be able to just tear house through a group of enemies as long as you have a good skill setup for them, and that just goes doubly so for Doom Knight that has such strong AoE attacks. As far as the rest of the squad is concerned, their equipment isn't as important, but we will highlight it if there's something to talk about. Renal and Clive are set up nearly identically. Their whole goal is to spam all sorts of cavalry support skills, primarily Knight's Pursuit and Cavalier Call. Knight's Pursuit, 1 passive point, physical potency of 50, hit count 1, hit rate 100%. Activates after a cavalry-based ally attacks. Follow-up attack a column of enemies with a piercing strike. So now, when we're getting out there, and I mean when any of them are attacking, this will trigger, but especially if Ajax is out there and he does a big Dark Flame, then the boys can start following up, deal even more damage to the things he just hit. It gets really nasty. Cavalier Call is the real meat and potatoes here, though. 1 passive point, activates before attacking with an active skill, grants cavalry allies in the user's row plus 20% attack, and effect can stack. So, obviously, we have both of these lads right here in the front row with us. They both go before Ajax does, so they will both take their actions, use Cavalier Call, buff Ajax, so before he even attacks the first time, foregoing any possibility of having any vengeance triggers or anything like that, he will already have a plus 40% to his attack because of Cavalier Call. It gets so nasty. Beyond that, we're relying on Wild Rush to stun columns of enemies, putting debuffs on them so that they, A, can't hit us as much because we are a slightly frail squad. I have some tankiness, but you can fold faster than you would expect, but primarily to lean into Ajax's desire to hit debuffed and disabled targets. We have Assaulting Lance if we need it, just clean up weakened enemies, and then Pile Thrust if there's nothing better to do and we just need to slap the snot out of something for a lot of damage. Clive is set up pretty much, again, the exact same way. They have Guarding Impetus with the Citadel Guard Sabatons to give themselves more AP, extra boosts to passive points, defensive stats, things like that. Basically, we just want these lads to survive, to give their buffs to Ajax, and then help with the cleanup process. For Eltalinda, she's primarily being used as a support option that can help clean up anything that Ajax's AoE doesn't deal with. For that, we're running Elemental Roar to attack all enemies. Potency increases with Fairy Count, which we have like 1 or 2 of. We're not super leaning into it, but it's a very solid option for cleanup, weakening things, etc. And then if we happen to wind up in a situation where we do have leftover AP, we have things like Thunderous Thrust to just try and finish things off. We could Fairy Heal, but it's not likely to ever actually happen because of the way that we have Elemental Roar set up, but it is there just in case. Really, though, the key element is going to be our passive skills. Boon of the Fairies, activating at the start of a battle, restoring HP to a row of allies and giving a buff that negates a single debuff is very, very nice, as this is a squad that's going to be thrown into the fire over and over again. Like you've been seeing in the footage throughout the video, they just are yeeted at the biggest groups of enemies that I can find, or the nastiest bosses. I'm picking up their horses and hucking them overhand, rider and all, directly into the face of whatever it is that's earned my wrath any given day. And just having this on hand to make sure that the boys up front are getting a little bit of a heal at the start of a fight to keep them going, also giving them a way to negate some debuffs as they're getting slapped by stuff, it helps a lot more than you might think. We then do have Elemental Impetus, giving us extra AP and Summoned Fairies, which again can be helpful, but you know, not the most valuable thing, not always going to happen. And then Curing Heal, more likely going to be what happens, just give minor HP to allies, remove their debuffs. Eltalinda is here to be a healer with one big attack that helps clean up with whatever happens to survive the initial round of rushes and charges, and she does that role very, very well. Finally, we have Rhaenys the Featherbow, the most recent addition to the squad, and one that I'm actually quite happy with. She's rocking just basic AP and passive point boosting stuff, Retaliation Earrings for a little bit of extra damage, and the King's Bow Historic just to give her a stat boost, because why not? Primarily, I have her here to just put debuffs on things, drop physical defense so we hit harder, reduce enemy passive points, reduce initiative, like... She's here to be a thorn in the side of whatever it is that we're fighting and make it even easier for the cavalry to run roughshod over them, and she does that extremely well. The big thing that I like about having her here is Shining Light, inflicting blindness on a row of enemies. And you might be thinking, like, okay, well, that's fine, I guess, but, like, wouldn't you want Ajax to get hit so you can activate Vengeance? And it's like, again, we don't really need to. With the buffs that he's getting from Cavalier's Call, he's already dealing so much damage. Better in a lot of situations to have him and his boys not be getting hit at all so that their resilience stays up and so that they can continue fighting for longer without having to fall back and heal, than taking hits to be able to get an attack boost that we don't need. So having Shining Light here, that'll activate for 2 passive points to blind a row of enemies whenever someone in that row attacks. Kino, great. Love it. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's a great defensive option in a squad that is sorely lacking them. Finally, we have Aerial Pursuit, which is why we have the Earrings of Pursuit. 1 passive point, 100 physical potency, hit count of 1, hit rate of 100%, ranged, of course. Activates after a flying ally attacks, follow-up attack a single enemy. This way, if I needed to swap in something, like I've done some stuff, like swapping in a flyer of some kind for Eltalinda because I need to be able to clear a group of Sainted or Radiant Knights that are going to be able to just stonewall Darkflame, then we can get a little bit of extra damage here with Rhaenys. It's not something that we've needed often. This squad is more than capable of cleaning up most scenarios, but it is something that we have the ability to just quickly swap in, and I've already got the setup here if I need it. And funny enough, I haven't needed any other changes. Like, Rhaenys is doing exactly what I need her to do here without ever actually really getting a ton of use out of Aerial Pursuit and the Earrings of Pursuit. It's just there as a convenience option, which I appreciate. All told, this is by far my single strongest squad. Again, if anyone's familiar with the stream, you guys have seen them in action. If you can just conceptualize of how this would function in battle, it's very easy to see how great it is. This has been my go-to answer. Is there a problem? Throw an Ajax at it. Something that looks like it's going to be hard for the rest of my squads to bring down, boot the horses in their direction. Really concerned that, well, we might be in risk of losing this mission if we don't intercept these enemies that are rushing our home base. Recall Ajax, and he will make sure that there is nothing left standing but a mountainous pile of smoldering ash where his enemies' bodies once stood. It's a ton of fun, and it's really pleasing to see a squad like this come together so well when I've had so many people ask me, like, well, you seem to love Doom Knights and Dark Knights, but I just can't get them to work right. Like, what am I doing wrong? How am I supposed to be using them? And I think the biggest thing that people run into is they just kind of ignore the magic side of the class. And I can get why, because at the end of the day, the only skill that you have that's leaning directly into the magic damage is Dark Flame, and you only get that after promotion. So until then, you're just rocking your Dark Knights with your Vengeful Axe and your Venom Axe and your Vengeance and your Sanguine Arts, and like, that's a fine setup, don't get me wrong, but it can be kind of hard to imagine, oh wait, there's now a whole magical component to this class that I didn't see when I was using them prior to promotion. So you just don't change into that, and that, you know, that's fair enough, but you are missing out if you do that. If you are looking to try and run at least one Doom Knight, I would argue potentially more, in your army, I highly, highly recommend that you get yourself a good magic setup for a Doom Knight. Pump up their stats. Give them just a couple of accompanying support units. It doesn't have to be cavalry if you don't want it to be. You can do other things like having witches and elven fencers that put some sort of magic tome conferral on your Doom Knight to boost their magic damage, or sergeants to give them guaranteed crits, things like that. Like, there's so many different options that you can do to buff up your Doom Knight. Either way, it's going to get you to the end result of them using one cast of Dark Flame and incinerating an entire squad of enemy dudes, or nearly, at least the front row. It's so much fun. At the end of the day, the biggest thing you need to keep in mind is that Doom Knights are not going to be super great at sustaining themselves. If you are in a situation where you get just the right flow going, where you are attacking and your enemy is attacking with the right types of hits, the right quantity of hits to hit your thresholds that you have for things like Sanguine Arts and things like that, and you can restore your own health while dealing a lot of damage, great. But it can be really hard to get that set up to happen extremely consistently, or it can be really hard to get that set up so that it happens extremely consistently, especially when there's so many different types of enemies that you're going to be contending with. So instead of doing that, get some support set up here. Having something like a Legionnaire or a Werebear that can absorb some hits for your Doom Knight, cool. Having something like a Cleric or an Elven Sibyl or an Elven Archer or any other potential healing support classes like that, also great. You know, before I swapped Rhaenys in here, we had, I think it was Tatiana, maybe Flora, one of my clerics, was protecting Ajax's squad. And having that healing was, oh my god, it was a godsend. It was just so good. So, yeah, you need to build into them a little bit, but Doom Knights have such incredible Wrecking Ball potential. They have such a high ceiling for what they're capable of. You are missing out if you don't give them another honest shot. That said, though, I'm going to wrap this one up here. Thank you all so much for watching. I do very much appreciate it. If you are interested in continuing to see more Unicorn Overlord content, please let me know down in the comments. I have a few other different squads and things that I want to cover from my True Zenoiran run. I'm finally going to do my comprehensive review of Unicorn Overlord now that we've largely cleared TZ mode. We still have to do the post-game things. We'll do that on stream, but you know, the story is done. And I just want to see. I just want to know, because as one of my channel mods, Segno, said, it's a shame to see people move on from this game so quickly when there's years worth of content to extract from it. So if you're one of the people who would want to see more stuff like that, let me know in the comments, please. It would mean the world. It would help make my planning process a whole lot easier when I know what it is that you guys are most interested in seeing. But with that said, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.